All right, we're recording and we're on. So
cool. Well, what a great way to lead into
we're
it.
shoeless and recording.
Are we really?
Yeah.
We're already live?
Yeah, so we're doing things a little different here on the Movie Mayor podcast. We're combining it with a beautiful listing that just went on the market, 19211 Habitat Cove. Very well priced, luxury living at its finest, and we're excited to show you guys a little bit behind the scenes and also incorporate the crowd in the podcast. So we got two special guests. Alana, I'll let you introduce.
Oh, I thought you were saying I was one of the special guests.
No, not you.
Okay, so Rahul is not a stranger to our podcast. You were one of our first guests on
This is his third time.
I was the first guest, was I not?
Yeah. No,
you were maybe
first.
probably the
one
first
of
guest.
the first. I thought I was the guest.
You
It was like
probably
in
were
your
the-
basement of your house. And like
Yeah,
the-
literally, during
it was in
COVID.
that like little dining room
Yeah.
or whatever.
And
And
it
you
was our
keep
makeshift
inviting him. You
podcast
should have
room.
learned your lesson by now.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe it. So Rahul is no stranger to our podcast or podcasts in general. Rahul Patel, owner Patel Gains, and owner of a handful of other things, which I'll let you, I don't want to butcher your resume. And then we have Sebastian Garzon.
There you go. Perfect. She's been practicing that.
Yeah, I've been practicing that. And you are the CEO of Angel
Executive
Investors?
Director of Alamo Angels.
Perfect. Amongst a lot of other things, which I'll let you also share your experience.
Yeah, well, let's start there. I want to first go into...
But I got the vest. So
Yeah, well, you got
She's
the
the most
vest.
official one. I
Just
know.
give you heads up.
We put you guys together for a reason
We
because
need
you
some
guys
merch.
are the kings of duos of companies and investing. And how do y'all know each other? What's the background on Rahul and Juan, or what, Sebastian?
How do we know each other, Rahul? Because of Alamo Angels, precisely because of it, right? I came to San Antonio about 3.5 years ago. I came here because of Alamo Angels. It was a great opportunity for me to lead an organization that I thought will be very impactful
I
for
didn't know
this
that.
community.
I know you
I didn't
came
know
here
that
for
either.
that. That's awesome.
And Rahul has been a part of the Alamo Angels pretty much since the beginning, founding member of the organization. And when I came, it was a crucial moment for Alamo Angels, and Rahul was one of the people among the team that was finding the path forward, and that's how our paths got crossed.
Yeah, I think when we were at a kind of a critical inflection point for Alamo Angels. So we, as an organization based as a nonprofit, but our goal is to try to bring as many quality companies that are investable, right? And so to San Antonio, for us to be able to pitch and us to be able to write checks and hopefully get returns. But we were just a kind of a hodgepodge organization, and we knew that for us as an organization, the board members, this was not our day-to-day job, but we were very interested and we needed to bring somebody to help us run it.
Right.
But we didn't have enough money to be able to run it as an organization. So we were able to kind of work a deal and get someone like Sebastian kind of on a part-time type basis. And that's kind of how we first started. And I remember when I first met Sebastian, I remember like, wait, we got some guy who like runs Airbnbs. Like that's what we did. But he took the job, right? But didn't realize like, how capable he was and what he was able to do. And fortunately we were able to keep him and get him on as full time. And so he really is the day-to-day driver of the organization. And so
Rahul, how did you find him initially though? Was it like did you put an ad out?
Airbnb.
Well, yeah.
he was my Airbnb host.
Yeah, he was my Airbnb,
One of my
my
Airbnbs.
super host. But was it through mutual connections? Did you put an ad out? Was it through other investment firm? And how did you find the opportunity and say, hey, this is something I'd be interested in?
Long story short, and the reason for which I came into the world of angel investing is because I was part of the team that created the very first angel investment network in South Texas, the South Coast Angel Network down in Corpus Christi.
Cool.
When we created that one, our friends down in the valley, they also wanted to create their own. And rather than replicating that effort, they used to drive up to Corpus Christi and learn from what we had done. So indirectly also kind of had to do with the creation of that one. And when I was in the middle of all this, I was working with a mutual friend of ours, David Fonseca, who was the CEO, or at the time he wasn't, but he ended up being the CEO at Velocity, Texas. And when we were looking at that inflection point that Rahul was talking about in terms of do we find a home for this organization that is so important and crucial to the ecosystem, Velocity Texas stepped it up, and those conversations kind of started with David and Rahul and other people within our network. And so given the fact that I was friends with David in the past, that we had created that angel network, he had suggested for me to be the one, and then they They ended up buying into the idea. David also happens to be from Colombia, so
wow.
he said, "I got a guy, right? One of those stories. I have a guy,
exactly.
and then this guy shows up, which is me, also with the same
I am the
accent,
guy.
and they're like, okay, what's happening here? Is this your cousin or something? But no, that's kind of how it all worked out.
He thought the salary we're offering was in
Pesos.
was
In
in
pesos,
US.
Colombian pesos.
He didn't realize the conversion didn't work so well. But here he is. He's still here
The
with us.
conversion rate. Okay, so that was 3 years ago?
That was a little over 3 years ago, three and a
I
half
would
years.
say a little bit more because I remember when we met you was kind of coming out of COVID a little
Yes.
bit.
Yeah.
So, late 2020, I guess.
I mean, lots of connections here, and shout out to you guys too, because when I first came here, it was a new community to me, so I didn't know the city. I didn't know what are the good sides, what are not so good, and so I ended up renting an apartment by the Pearl. And then when I was ready to buy my home, that's when it was actually through Rahul that
Yeah.
I got to meet David. And you guys ended up helping me in my opinion, one of the toughest times in real estate. And I couldn't believe that I ended up getting a house because of your help. And
you.
in my opinion, a really good deal because at the time everyone was paying over asking
Right.
price, and that was not the case for us. So thankful for
It's
that
a
as
great
well.
house. That's
Yeah.
awesome. We were pretty good. I would say we're pretty good. Right?
Well, I remember, what was it, Mother's Day?
I
I think it was Mother's Day. We went and showed y'all a house.
Yes.
And then he and I
On
went to
Mother's
like
Day.
Mother's Day brunch. He was like, want to come with me to show a house? I'm like, of course. And I think that was like one of the first times we had met.
We met, yeah.
And I'm like, sure.
Want to go on a date?
Want to go on a date?
It's better than me. I took my wife to Taco Bell for our anniversary.
Oh my
so-
God.
Hey, I think it's like
Shout out
2 or 3
Taco
years in a
Bell.
row. We're going now, right? Yeah.
Taco Bell. Taco Bell's where it's at. Okay, so now that you've planted your roots here, you have a house. Continue talking about like where you picked up Alamo Angels, like where you came in, and then also the partnership with Velocity. Velocity is an incubator, would you say, for startup companies? Used to be, once was, and then let's talk about kind of like what that has looked like.
Yeah, I think Velocity now it's a bigger. There's a bigger picture out of everything that's happening at Velocity. When Velocity itself got started, it was an innovation center that supported early stage companies within the life sciences. Now it's shifted into developing an innovation district, which is much more than just being an innovation center. For those of in the audience that are listening to the podcast, it's basically downtown, but it's just on the east side of downtown. And we're in the process of finalizing the first phase of the development, which is about 6 acres that have been fully developed now.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And then there's another 6 acres in between there and the Alamo Dome that were purchased last year, and that will be the continuation of the work that will take us to the development of that innovation district. And so that's a little bit about Velocity now. Why it's so important to the story about Alamo Angels is the fact that most angel investment networks across the nation are standalone entities.
Right.
And as such, they run with very limited resources. And not to say that, I mean, Rahul and I know that we don't have unlimited resources, but we do have the support of that bigger foundation, that bigger entity that provides us with a home, that provides us with shared services, marketing, accounting, those type of things that helps us be laser focused on what it's important, which is finding good quality companies and recruiting accredited investors and then doing the matchmaking.
Right. So it helps you kind of offset a lot of the overhead, but then while you are able to still remain super lean and continue to just focus, whatever that y'all bring in can just go directly towards keeping, Alamo Angels real lean and profitable.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you haven't been down to Velocity or the innovation district that's happening, it's worth a drive, right? So I think in San Antonio, we've got, everyone has their pockets, right? So those folks that are hanging out on the Rim and Dominion or Stone Oak area, Pearl, you've seen all that. But if you actually go down and see what's happening with Velocity, what's happening in that innovation district, and the type of investments that are being made that are going to fuel the future, it's really cool. The life sciences, biosciences, the things that are there are really great. And then for us, especially, going through the history of Alamo Angels, just like other cities, we, wanted an investment organization. And so people kind of hear the word Alamo Angel and they think we're based as a nonprofit. So they think we're just kind of here to help.
Right.
We are. But the reality of this is we want to create a strong investment organization with really smart people that have the ability to not just invest capital into companies, but then also be able to be a strong resource for that company.
Right.
Because then that company can only accelerate its path to getting to where it needs to go, right? So I think that's what makes it different. But then having an anchor like Velocity is what's making Alamo Angels an organization that's now being looked at not just across Texas, but now across the nation as kind of the blueprint, right? Because we've really, again, in a city where, I think we were ranked like the 4th, 5th best city in Texas, right? And yet we have the largest organization in Texas. So I think it's a great, we're only 3 years old as far as our marriage with Velocity, but I think our organization is at a trajectory point that's going to really take us to new levels. So
I remember going to one of the first pitch events, and it was very small.
Yeah.
Like, you can definitely tell it was a starting up company, and then recently we went to one, and
the room was packed.
Insane. Like, it was a definitely amazing, cool experience. I wanted to talk about a little bit the process of getting some of those companies to, how do you vet them out? How do you find them? Like, what's that process like for those that don't know about, angel investing?
So I'm glad you asked that, because a lot of times
Did you vet this company out?
it
says Sazon, not Garzon.
Sazon. Water with Sazon.
Yeah.
No, it's often overlooked, because most people may think that it's just, okay, well, somebody has a good idea, just bring him over and somebody will invest on him. There's a little bit of an art and a science behind that. For context, we are sourcing companies all around the U.S., and sometimes that's also a topic of interest or a topic of discussion, because people may say, why aren't you just investing on companies out of San Antonio? Challenges with that is the ecosystem is not fully developed for us to keep our group of 140 investors entertained and truly investing on good quality companies out of what's happening in San Antonio. So we're looking elsewhere. We're also potentially the only angel investment network in Texas, for sure, that is investing into companies out of Latin America.
Yeah.
That is important because that's an emerging market that I believe is going to be a huge opportunity from an investment standpoint that nobody's paying attention to, and we are the ones that are doing it. I guarantee it, 2 years from now, others will start doing it, but we are the ones that are taking the lead and making that happen. So I think that's also super important. You ask, how do you source them? We have a lot of times it's just word of mouth, and it's one of those things that, like your brokerage, when you do a good job with your clients, others are going to refer you to them. And while you may think that the ecosystem is huge because we're sourcing companies from all around the US, it's really not. When you get across a good quality founder, those founders run into the same circles, whether it's in Chicago, New York, or the Bay Area, they know each other. When we bring them here, when we allow for them to have a good experience, when we write them a check, they go back to their own circles and they tell them Alamo Angels is the real deal. That's why we now, on average, are getting 30 applicants every single month.
Wow.
That's
and
amazing.
The goal is only to feature 3 of them.
Right.
So there is a little bit of a process. And then how do they get selected? Just so that Rahul and I are not the ones that are being, okay, well, you guys know those people and they ended up pitching. That's not the case. We actually have set up a committee, so it's very community driven. So there's about 10 different people that will review these applicants before they get selected. That way our own biases and our own relationships are not in the middle, but it's truly the community as a whole that is choosing those companies that come and pitch.
Doing the due diligence.
That's super cool. I mean, when the first kind of event we went to like that, it really did feel like Shark Tank. It was like I don't know what the time frame of their pitch was. Maybe 3 minutes, or how long did they have to pitch their company?
8 minutes.
8 minutes. And so, and then the questions and then the type of questions they were asking were very, very relative to the company. That even the members of Alamo Angels knew exactly what to ask. And so, seeing that in person, being a part of it, and hearing the stories behind some of these companies was pretty incredible. And
well, let's not forget the one I think you came to, one of the companies that pitched. Remember, she turned down an offer from 2 sharks.
That's right. Yeah.
On Shark Tank, right? So the companies, it's very kind of easy to forget. Been part of this organization long enough to kind of remember and know very well the types of companies that we had initially, right?
Yeah.
We would have it at a restaurant. We would have it at anywhere we could have somebody come. And in fact, we'd be lucky to get enough applications for us to even consider who to take. It was like 3 people were submitted, but they all get the pitch. There's no surprise for us to see 30, 40 people or companies submit applications and for us to get to pick 3 or 4. That's why we're getting companies that are actually been in Shark Tank, companies that have invested in Shark Tank. We have companies that we've invested in, and then we've seen them go on to Shark Tank and then get subsequent funding even. So it's getting interesting. So when we try to say it's like Shark Tank style investing, it is, right? The difference maker is we're creating a strong community and cohort of individuals working for the same goal. So a lot of times on the Shark, it's like, do this deal with me. You don't want a deal with him.
Right.
It's not that. It's saying, hey, can we get him? If he's in on the deal, I'm in, because I know he knows this space, right? So when we see a guy like Bobby Shaw, David Katzenbaum, Amit, those folks that know a space and they're in, I'm in too, right? Because there's I get it. So it's dramatically changed. So we tell people all the time, I came to an event, look at the thing, it's like, it came in 19, come again.
It's different,
Came in 21, come again, and things have changed significantly, right?
You can definitely feel the community too. You can feel when we walked in that everybody knew each other. It was a very community-driven goal. I think they were all in it together, which is important. Different than Shark Tank, you're kind of fighting against the other shark. This one, people did know the industry. They were asking relative questions, and they were also asking each other, like, hey, what do you think of this? And so that community effort, I think, is super unique to what you guys have built.
Well, and I also think, I told David, I was like, if you want to be in a room, this is a great room to be in, because everybody's at a kind of like a different level. There's been a due diligence to get the people in the door. It's not just, hey, come one, come all, come. If you got $1 to spend, we'll take it kind of thing. Y'all really have vetted every single person in that room to be an investor. And so you know that nobody's kind of BSing or like weaseling their way into that room. You know that they're legit. They have the money liquid to invest. They know they're stuff in a certain niche or a certain market or a certain area. And so I told David, I was like, it's really refreshing, coming from an industry where it's 13,000 people and it's really not that hard. The bar is set very low to be a realtor, unfortunately. Well, now with the NAR changes, I think it'll weed out half of them. But for y'all, you really have done your due diligence in regards to the requirements and the prerequisites to be considered an investor and to be considered even invited. And then you have to be accepted and, be reviewed on the board. And so I told David, wow, it's really nice to be in a room of people that actually kind of walk the talk. And that everybody in the room is not just, raising their hand, asking a question to flex. It's because their wheels are turning. They're actually thinking about, could this be a viable product? Could this be a great investment? And what's the return on that as well? And I thought that's cool, just to kind of be in the room where it's just weeded out everybody. So can we talk a little bit about what the requirements are to be considered as an investor? If somebody's listening to this and they say, hey, that's something I'm interested in, what are the requirements?
So it's actually fairly easy for us because we are not the ones that set those requirements per se. It's the government itself.
Right.
And so we are regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And what they say is, in order for you to be participating on this asset class, you must be an accredited investor. Yeah. Sometimes that words may be perceived as, okay, you got to take some sort of test or why not. That's not necessarily the case. It's, at the end of the day, it's high net worth individuals. So the SEC says you must be someone whose annual income is at least $200,000, and this must be met for 2 years, consecutive 2 years, or someone whose annual net worth, is at least $1 million besides your primary residence. And so with that, we start from there on, right?
Right.
And then the other part is kind of what Rahul was saying. We want to make sure that these people are there for the right reasons. And that is the reason for which we went, to your point, from 52 members when we took over to 140 now and becoming the largest angel investment network in the state of Texas, which is not a small accomplishment. But we've built it in such a way that those that are coming in have the resources, number one, but number two, have more to offer other than writing company a check.
Right.
I think the big difference also for what is really fueled is when we first started this organization, we were looking for people who wanted to be angel investors. Really realizing a lot of people don't know what that means. But really when you look at this, is like everyone who's been, somewhat successful or has kind of reached that status where they have investable dollars has all met someone who's like, hey, I got this idea. Or wouldn't it be great if we could do this? Or how come no one's invented X, Y, Z? And then you go and you have somebody who's pitched you an idea to invest in something. And I think most people make major mistakes like that because they invest based on just an idea or someone they know or a combination. But really a startup is significantly challenging, right? And again, as a lawyer, you see this all the time. You see somebody goes, oh, we started an entity and we're 50-50, but now I need $500,000 and he doesn't have any money to put in. He put in the first 50,000, but that's it. Well, I think that's what this really creates is an organization that allows you to realize there's a lot of learning in this space. So just because you've been successful doing what you do, there's a lot of learning here, but you're learning with people who know what they're doing. We're also in an organization, for us, a big part of what we did not have was an education team. So we've changed these 3 core pillars to be about investing, networking, but then education. And so again, to be an accredited investor, you've done something successful, something you've done well, right? Whatever that might be. But educating you on something else is very different, right? So creating that ecosystem has allowed us to grow. And so I think that's what makes it a safe place. When you say, hey, well, there's a lot of questions being asked, not sure. Well, that's what we're doing. We're going back and teaching those. What's a safe no? What's a convertible? What are these types of things in a space where you don't feel like, well, I have accomplished. I don't need to learn this. So you're making better decisions when that opportunity does come around, if that makes sense, right?
Well, and I think it makes perfect sense because when we were there, David and I were listening to a lot of the investors in the room ask questions, and I'm like, how do they know this? And I was talking to some of the ladies after, the very few ladies, which we'll talk about as well. And I said, how do you know what questions to ask? And in the companies that were there were 3 very different companies. Yeah. And I was like, how did you know what questions to ask? She's like, just over time, you just start to learn. And and you feel like it is a safe place to ask questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question. It was fascinating just kind of watching back and forth ping pong all the questions that were asked in the room. And it was really cool. And it was an education. And there's David and I Googling. And I'm like, oh, I knew that. I didn't know what all these acronyms meant. And people are talking about KCI and DTC. And I'm like, okay, I knew that. I remember that from finance. I remember that. And it's kind of all coming full circle, kind of like Spanish is, which I want to talk about passport to fluency as well.
Focus.
Yeah, focus. And so I think that it really is a safe place because that okay, number one, if I'm in this room, I'm with other vetted people, so I know that it's a safe place. Nobody's going to be like, who invited her asking this dumb question? They're going to say, okay, obviously she was able to earn her way in this room. And then on top of it, it is a great learning opportunity. In every single business, so at least the 3 that were there when we were there, were so different on the spectrum that there was an opportunity for learning. And I'm like, now all of a sudden I can talk about 3D metal printing. Look at me, because of one of the presenters. And so I thought that part was really fascinating.
No, I think it's super cool that you guys, this is different too for me, is what you guys walked around the room and you introduce each other. You introduce member to member and people and let them feel involved and let them feel comfortable. I think that's investing is intimidating no matter what, especially for those that aren't familiar with doing it. So for you guys to make the effort to go around the room and introduce people to other people in the room, that was a comforting feel of the group itself. But I do want to touch base on the women because you 3 women that were there just outcast me, and I'm like, okay,
3
cool.
women.
But it's important that women also are involved in investing, and I'm happy you guys are taking initiative, starting that and providing the education for it. So, do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Well, I'll let y'all speak about it, and then I'll try to fill in. But you had reached out to me when you had seen that I had kind of started this women's collective group, and I'm really trying to create an organization or a group where women can come together, high-minded, high-level individuals, where I realize that there really is there's a need for it. And like I said, it's not Bible study, it's not book club. We're doing high-level, high-minded things. And so you had reached out to me saying, look, we need more women in investing. And so you and I had a really great chat. And so if you want to share a little bit about what your plan and your initiative is, and then we can kind of
I'll go first.
Bring it on home.
He's going to get technical, so I'm going to go first. I know what look, first, I think as an organization, we've been in like any other business, right? We've been fight or flight stage. So at first, we just got to survive. And so that's prior to us even get to Alamo Angels, or Velocity. We were just, I can remember Amit, myself, a handful of us were just putting money in to just even have an event, right? But then we got to grow. And naturally, like anything else, you get a referral from somewhere, you go down that track and you go to that one because, hey, that's where, and so that's where we've been. And then you have an opportunity to step back and say, hey, what does our makeup look like? Mm-hmm. And we struggled in attracting women to come to these events. So, like typical guys, we're like, okay, what do we do? Let's have wine, or let's do this and see if we can attract.
That'll bring in the
we don't know. Again, we don't know.
Lure them
we're trying,
He's
right?
like, we bought Bath and Body Works candles.
We tried it.
Nothing worked.
We invited folks that had come and say, hey, we'll put you on the board. And, for a long time, that was kind of this strategy. I'm like, look, it has to be real, right? And that's what was not happening. We were inviting people, but that weren't really interested in this. And so I think, over the last year or so, it's been a focus and we have some great leaders in the city. When you talk about like Kat and Alexander Frey and, Gabby, Meg, so many others that we know we have the nature, but I think it comes down to like human nature. So you pointed out that there's 3 women in that room. Well, we all do that when we go somewhere and we go, man, I'm the only guy that took his shoes off or when I walked in because I'm the only Asian in there, right? Like it's just natural. Well, I think that what happens is then our repeat opportunity is struggles. So it feels like, hey, I was the only woman when it doesn't. Or the same thing if you're a guy and you showed up, it was only women in the room. Same thing. Hey, man, you know what? Seems like that's just more for women, right? So I think we have been struggling with that. And I think even as a nation, most things that have been dominated by males in the industry, whether it's law or finance or anything, it just takes a critical breakthrough point. And that's what we're hoping for, right? And we need that because it does create vibrancy, energy, a different viewpoint, another excellent kind of, what I would call an expert in the room, right? There's things that we all, human nature, see differently, but because boys, girls, men, women, we see things a little differently. We need that perspective, right? So I think for us, it's a huge, huge goal of ours. But being honest is we struggle with it just like anyone else does in inclusion. And your statistic about women investors changing, I mean, it's a true statistic, right? So anything that we can do to attract more of anyone that's not doing this is a huge win. But again, if we can get more women involved, it's a huge step forward. And girl dad, let's go. Let's rock and roll.
Who runs the world?
Yeah.
Me.
So now go back to our
I think that
our
the
plan.
technical plan that Rahul was speaking of. No, it's a reality that there is just not enough women in venture capital. And that's a huge challenge from an ecosystem wide because if there is no women investors, those that are coming and pitching with female-led startups are potentially not going to be able to secure the funding if they had their peer support, if that makes sense. And so we know that this is a challenge that is just not Alamo Angels or is not just San Antonio. This is something that's happening all around the country, honestly, all around the world. Now, for me, the message here is just like nobody ever thought that little San Antonio with little Alamo Angels could be put on the map because of creating now the largest angel investment community in Texas. I guarantee it that nobody will ever think that we will have a very inclusive and diverse network that does include that female representation. And I'll tell you, a year from now, we're going to be hearing that Alamo Angels is that inclusive environment where females can thrive and can invest and can come and pitch. And so I believe that that's kind of where we're heading towards. And your involvement and participation will be key to all of that.
Thank you. It's been slow and steady, but we have a lot of really exciting things in the works. And it's so true to your point about a lot of female-led or female-driven companies is, the very first one that pitched was, body products. And she said that she had gotten certified, which is the closest certification to European standards, which to David, he's like, I don't care. And I'm like, what do you think about the smell? And he was like, I don't care. And I'm like, but as a female, these are things to, from just a point blank female perspective, these are for female-led products. These are things you want to consider. And then I also think there's a lot of other things to consider as well when, let's take, for example, that's one of the companies that pitched was the juice right here. If from a mom, I'm thinking, what's the sugar? Is it going to stain my carpet? You think about all those things. Thank you.
Yeah. It's actually water.
3 grams of sugar, and it's water. Yeah, it's more of a drink.
Yeah, we don't say juice.
My bad.
It's okay though.
Latin owned. So you have to think about that female perspective. And then you also think about, I was listening to a podcast and they were saying that more CEOs, more C-suite level employees should be hiring women because of female intuition. That is irreplaceable. That is, something that you cannot find, and just guys just don't have it. And there is something to be said for, what is your thought on this? What do you get? David will say, hey, what do you think about that person? I'm like, I just did not get a good vibe, or I don't get a good read, or I was reading this body language. And also, we're at a predominantly female-owned brokerage.
Yeah, we're pretty outnumbered.
Yeah, he's definitely outnumbered. And I tell him,
there's a lot of women in the room.
There's a lot of women in this room right here, right now.
Potential folks that are showing up to the next event.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I'm like, you have to take these things into consideration, because he doesn't care about certain things. And I'm like, but as women, these are things that we care about, and these are things we prioritize.
I love that you brought that up for the following reason. A lot of people may think that what we're doing is the typical type of investment or traditional investment, because when you're doing that, you're always seeking history. What does that company, what have they done in the past? And the truth is, angel investing is more qualitative than quantitative. There is a reason for which these companies are not going to go and get that funding from a bank.
Yeah.
They just don't have that history. And so when we're investing on these companies, yes, it's great that they have a good product. The bottling looks great, whatever. At the end of the day, the qualitative elements of what that company looks like is what's going to make us invest or not. And so having someone like you, David and yourself being one team, if we have companies that come and you say, you know what, I do believe that the qualitative elements there are for us to make an investment, then that investment will then happen.
Right.
If it would have been only David, then I'm sorry to pick on you. But
okay.
For us as males, I'm just going to pick on us. We're probably going to ask, show me the history, show me the financials. And that's not necessarily how you should be thinking about this. It's a whole different ballgame.
Right. Well, and it's the male and female dynamic. Women create relationships to connect, or women connect to create relationships, and men connect to solve problems. Or most of the time it's very transactional. And I feel like when you have both of those dynamics in the room, and being able to ask the questions and being able to look at it from a different picture, and Laura mentioned some really good points in regards to the factory, and she having her dad who is a chemist, and a lot of things men may have not ever thought of that or experienced that. So what were you gonna say, Rahul?
I think back to the core, I think it's just perspective, right? Like anything. So when, my parents immigrated here, so I was the first generation born in this country. I have a different perspective than somebody who's been, 10 generations deep than someone else who's not. Same thing with somebody who comes. So I think it's for us, again, perspective. We joke a lot. He'll say something. I'm like, you can't say that, right? And he's like, well, that's how it translated to me. But it's just perspective. So I think, whether it's women investing, minorities investing, whatever that is, we need more of that diversity, period, right? And I think that makes our group better, makes our group stronger, and it brings us different perspective, right?
Right.
Whatever that might be, because that's what we need. And so I don't think it's necessarily just whether they're more see something for value versus the finances. I think it's more a matter of just a different perspective, right? And that's what it comes down to. So we're hopeful that we can continue to grow that.
Well, and I think that's a great point. I think, being in the room, like David had said, y'all were very kind to go around and introduce us to everybody. And we've still stayed in touch with a lot of the people that we met. I actually ran into one of the guys at 2 other separate events after that, leading up to it. So it's just like great networking and great connecting. Yeah. But also all the different, like you said, there's a lot of minorities in the room, a lot of people from all over, not necessarily just San Antonio or even the United States, age ranges as well. You have a little bit of everything, people in all different sectors. And so I think that it's really important, after the pitch event, David and I had some friends over and I was sharing it with them, and we had all different generations and ages represented in the room, and every single person brought up a different point of view and a different perspective. And I was like, I would have never thought of that. And they said, well, I would have never thought about things that you were, thinking of as well. And so I think that's really cool too, to have even just age and generation represented, because we're thinking from a different, we're all in the same generation, but we're thinking from a different generational perspective than, say, my dad would, or someone of an older generation when they're thinking of more of, kind of like a different perspective. So I think that's absolutely true and a great point.
And Alana, I've been at this long enough to know that the demographic has typically always been the same. And I feel very proud of the community that we've been able to build precisely because of that.
Yes.
You go anywhere around the nation, and for an angel investment network, it's always going to be an older
white
male.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. The challenge is the world has changed.
It is, yeah.
And people that look like us can now participate on this type of asset class, and that was not the case even 10 years ago. So and we've gotten this. Rahul came up with a great idea last year of let's do an awesome pitch event, and we did it almost a year ago in May. And so we had this almost like a Shark Tank production level pitch event, and I recall someone that came from JP Morgan, and she's been in both coasts attending these type of events, engaging with these type of communities, and the feedback that she provided us with was, this is the most diverse network that I've ever interacted with.
That's impressive.
To me, that was impressive.
That's a compliment. Absolutely. Well, and it just kind of co-signs everything that you've been doing and working towards, and having that diversification, all the different backgrounds, everybody coming in. Like you said, now, I mean, one of the companies he was filming, or he was doing his presentation from Peru or Chile. Yes. And so I thought that was really cool just to see. What? I'm not good at geography.
It's in South America. It's in South America.
Somewhere. It's like Chile, Peru.
Collectively, we were able to come up with the 7 continents the other day.
Okay, yeah, that's a different
Collectively.
story.
She's giving you a hint. She wants to go to Machu Picchu. She's been telling you for a while, and you're just not
I've been
getting
brushing up on my Spanish.
You are pretty good.
Is that near Austin?
So let's talk about now the future of the women in investing. So I was fortunate enough to be accepted into the group, into the organization. David and I are officially members of Alamo Angels, and now I need a vest.
Yeah. I need a vest.
First things first.
And a black t-shirt.
I need a vest.
A new black t-shirt.
And so now, and we have a lot of really exciting things in the works, but what is it exactly that, let's get really micro in regards to what is it exactly that you're looking, if somebody's listening to this, female, successful, they say they meet the criteria of being an accredited investor, what are some other things that you're looking for if somebody wants to become a female in investment?
Well, let me ask it in a different perspective.
Okay.
I've known you for a long time.
Yep.
Follow me on social media, know what we're up to. What took you so long to come check out an Alamo Angels event?
Great question. Honestly, I think it was a little bit of like an imposter syndrome type thing. Like maybe we weren't good enough. Maybe we don't know enough. Maybe we're not qualified enough. And so that, I mean, when Sebastian had reached out, I was like, me? I think that's what it had come from, because obviously David had done work for y'all. And
so I think
you said you had been invited a while
back. From my
back.
perspective, I think her excitement of wanting to be involved brought me in. So I think that's something unique is, her bringing women in or you bringing women in, we'll bring the males in as well that maybe are like, haven't thought about it. You know what? If you're actually showing a really solid interest in this and you want to be involved, I want to be involved too. I want to hear why it's so great that you want to be involved. And so that's unique. And I do think that just being asked is important.
Yes.
Asking women, hey, do you want to be involved in this? Is it something you're open to doing? And that'll probably be a nice, important step.
Well, and I also think, kind of piggybacking off of what you said, there was a little bit of like an imposter syndrome of like, am I worthy enough or qualified enough or, whatever. But I also think, I do have my entrepreneurial background. I started a PR company on accident straight out of college. So I did that. I was ranked the number 3 best startup back then. Nice. In my first year, after 9 months. And so I have that background. And then I went to the corporate world and I was in title for 10 years. So now I think for David and I having almost 2 years under our belt of owning the company and knowing what it's like, I very much own this company as much as he does. We have financials. We do all, we've reviewed our P&L. We're looking at expanding our office. Like, Rahul's been a part of that as well. Kind of the ebb and flow of owning a large scale business like this. Now I feel like, okay, this is definitely more in my wheelhouse than it may have been 3 years ago, 5 years ago. And also COVID has changed the landscape of a lot of things too. Having a community, so many people have gone to work from home and never come back. And so being able to have a community and getting people out and connecting with people again, which is kind of why it was great that this women's collective thing happened on accident. I think that being able to use that and as a launching pad for inviting women to invest, and women very much are worthy of sitting at the table as the men are. And, I read that in Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In book 10 years ago, that instead of being, the secretary, be sitting at that executive board table, and you deserve a spot just as much as any other guy does. And so I think that's always been the mindset I've had. And that's why when you had reached out to me, I was like, I'm just going to say, yes, we're doing this. We're just going to jump in. And I heard I heard a quote the other day, and it was like, just jump and build the parachute on the way down. Like, you can't buy momentum, just launch, just go. And so when you and I had talked, I was like, okay, we're doing this. And I already started thinking of all the women that I can invite that I know that fit that criteria, that also I know. But, and you know, I think something is to be said that I'm not going to go and show up and just say, hey, here's $50,000. It's still, I want to kind of remove the stigma of like,
hey, don't do that.
No, but you're still going to consult with your wife or your husband. Like, you're still going to, I don't want it to be, I think there's a stigma of like, well, men don't consult with their wives in regards to investing disposable income, or women like, oh, well, I would still need to get permission from my husband. Absolutely. Like, I would 100% be sitting there saying, David, this is something I feel really passionate about. I think we should look into it.
It's a team, yeah.
It's a team
Can
effort.
they consider that with Amazon purchases too? Is that on the docket? No.
Yeah.
That doesn't count.
That doesn't meet
That doesn't count.
no.
So going back to your question, I think there's several things. So, you know, I'm going to put my group fitness hat on, right? Like, group fitness has been an explosive sector in the fitness business that was led by women. One, the comfort level of women being in a setting in which they're surrounded by others, but in a setting where they could feel comfortable, right? And that also creates a different approach, like, where it can become a stigma. For example, Pilates. You know, when you think Pilates, what do you think? Women.
Yeah.
Right? You don't. And so what about Pilates is nothing about it is built for just women, right? But yet that's who predominates that. So when you say, if you were a Pilates business, say, we need to get more men in here, like, what do we do? Well, that's a challenge when you've built something or society has put this culture, then we have to rename. So this isn't something Alamo Angels has done that says we don't have enough in our organization that no one else has done. We're just trying to break a cultural kind of path that has been there. You touched on 2 or 3 things that I think are important. Number one, probably being invited. Yeah. So we probably, you know, how do we get better at that is important. I think being invited by somebody that can help you feel comfortable when you do come in makes a huge difference. Just like going to a group fitness gym and someone says, hey, you want to come with me? Yeah. Then you kind of go, okay, I'll come try this with you.
They're vouching for it.
They're vouching for it. They're there, and then they're going to be there with you during that. So I think that helps. But if you go there and no one looks like you, no one is resembling you, then you challenge, you come, but then you don't come back. And we've had that. So it's not like we haven't had women come. But again, like you said, you distinctly remember that 3 women were there. Well, you know, did you count the number of men that were there? Right. And so I think it's the same kind of situation. And then the last element of it, I think, is when you touched on is feeling of, I don't know what word you use, but like, we're not good enough. But I think the analogy there actually rings through, not for women, but for the whole group. We have folks that just don't know what we do and don't know that they can do this, right? Or they could be a part of this, or that they don't even have to. They don't have to invest. There's no pressure to come and write a check. The only pressure we have for you is to come and learn each time. So whether it takes you 3 years before you write one, well, then let's make sure that that's a good one.
Right.
So if you don't write a $5,000 check every time you come, but you write one $50,000 one, well, let's make sure that's a good one, right? You've understood those. So I think that's kind of where we have been. We've got a group. Our group has this image, and I'm not just saying Alamo Angels, but all Angel. It's got a palette. We just have to infiltrate it, and we need leaders to do that. We need voices to do that. Someone like you that's going to drag them, come, because we've had to do that to get people to come to our organization, and now we're maybe not having to drag people, right?
But also make it fun too. I mean,
right.
I had fun.
It was
met people.
Fun. Like,
there was drinks.
It's a ton of fun.
It was great.
We have the pitches are fun, and like most, it's not like a bunch of guys just sitting around watching Shark Tank, right? We watch it as a family. I watch it with my kids. So I think those are the things that help us create this. But again, it's perspective, because we can't say, because otherwise we're going to say, well, how do we get more women here? I don't know. What do we do this? But instead of asking, why haven't you come, right? Yeah. I think that's going to help us answer more questions. And I would say, back to challenge to you, rather than us really answering the question, is saying, asking your friends that meet this criteria, because it is a couple, right? It is a two-way street. Right. So if someone says, do you qualify? They don't just say, hey, David, it's you and it's my and my wife's spousal income. What do we have together? Do we qualify? Yeah, so why don't you come? What would it take for you to come? So I think that's the thing. You can get 50 guys together for a poker game. You can get 50 ladies together to go do, a beat cabana party. Well,
Bunko.
Right, whatever. So how can we get them, and then what are the questions that they say, or what are their reservations that they have? Because if you can bring those reservations, then we can help solve how to break those down.
Right.
Well, and I think two key elements. Number one, and I'm glad that you brought it up, is getting that invitation, right? So I believe that we're now much more vocal in terms of saying we want you.
Yes.
And so the
Asking
community
for it.
now knows that. And that event that we hosted for International Women's Day, where it was a sold out event, you two came and you noticed how everyone not only showed up, but everyone was fully engaged,
Right.
which I made that comment that day. I don't know if you were still there or not, but for me, that's how you know how good of an event that was, because I did not see a single person looking at their phone or making comments or chit-chatting with their neighbor. Every single one of them were looking at
And
what was
asking
going
questions.
on there.
Everybody wanted
Asking
to ask a question.
questions, engaged. So that's number one. And then number two, and I think the pivotal moment in which, because by the way, this is not the first time that we're trying to get women engagement within our group. We've been trying it for like a year and a half now. We actually tried to absorb an angel network that was specific to women that had diluted, and so we tried to pick up the pieces that didn't work out. But for me, the pivotal point as of why we have some momentum now is the fact that the champions for this initiative are women themselves.
Right.
It's no longer Rahul and I. And that, I believe, is the key differentiator. It's not the same for me to come and ask your friend, even if you refer her to me, to join us and tell them all the great things that are happening, than for you to say, I am a part of this, I believe that this is something good, and you too should be part of it.
Right. Well, and I think it's also, and I've learned that just in my PR days. Like, it's so much easier to sell something when someone else is, tooting their horn, or someone else. I mean, that's how I feel like. And same thing with real estate. When somebody else is saying, you got to meet David, you got to meet one of the agents at the brokerage, this is a great, when somebody else is kind of doing that goodwill. And then on top of it, it's breaking the stigma of it being a good old boys club. I have no problem with that. That does not scare or intimidate me, because for the last 10 years, in my first few years in real estate, I was in commercial real estate, which is all predominantly male. So I had no problem with that. But it's breaking that stigma of women might being like, oh, I have to be in a room of all guys. And like, well, I don't know what the questions to ask. Don't ask any questions. Just take it all in. Learn every single pitch event or any opportunity. I'm like still Googling stuff and learning. And I have a whole notes page of like, okay, I need to make sure that I stay fresh on these things. You're laughing at my SAT words, aren't you?
Dave is the best. He says like 6 things during the entire podcast. And
Is he even here?
Eric
could just cut him out right
it's
here. He's not even sitting next
it's
to
so
me.
great. It's usually the random giggle, and then
Yeah.
and then she asks the question, but before he can answer, she keeps going.
Yeah,
so
he's
it's
not
great.
even. Eric, actually, just cut it off right here.
It's great. He giggles, and then she's like, "What are you laughing at? Are you laughing at?" And before he can answer, she starts talking.
dare you
so
make a
it's
sound.
great. It's like,
Yeah, just stay there. We're doing roles reversed. I'm just kidding. Okay, well, do you have anything to say?
No, I was listening to you.
I forgot what I was saying.
Alana, I'll say for us the most important element, regardless of like if we truly stay focused on our mission, is we all have an interest in making this community a better community. And we all hear about the great big companies that are coming and the development that is happening and why not. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to small businesses. And you are small business owners, I am. And we are the ones that are making an impact when it comes to economic development in any community.
Right.
When it comes to economic development in a place like San Antonio, having a strong entrepreneurial ecosystem is going to be vital in order for our kids to have a future if we want them to remain in a place like San Antonio. And that's something that we're working towards. And what not many people realize is that angel investing is a crucial element in the whole thing. The reason for that is, and it has happened, that if you start a startup company in San Antonio, you most likely will have eventually to ask for money from a third party besides your friends and family, right? That's the first round. When you get to that and you don't have someone like Alamo Angels that is willing to give you the funding that you need to take that to the next level, what's going to happen? Most likely you'll go to Austin. Most likely you go to the Bay Area, right? And so from an economic development perspective, I don't think many people are realizing how crucial it is for us to have a strong community like ours. And so yes, it's about investing. Yes, it's about having fun. It may be about women. It may be about minorities. At the end of the day, though, the message is, in order for us to have a thriving community, this is a crucial element. If it was not because of Alamo Angels, I don't know what some of these companies will do.
It's so true.
We had a company last year that was prior to that. We invested in the company. Women found a female founded company that had a successful exit. Right here in San Antonio. Yeah. So I mean, it's happening. And again, when you look at this as like, it's tough, but none of us look at a deal or want to look at something, make a decision differently, whether it's a woman-led founder or not. Mm-hmm. But man, I mean, women founded and led companies are dynamic, right? There's one that him and I were at, and we were listening to the founder speak and kind of go through this. And I remember to look me and him and go, "How do we get her? Like what yeah. Like it was just another one of those, like it's engaging." So I think the opportunities are there. We just need a few more folks like you, right, to really get involved. And you brought up some great points that I think that's the questions, like I would ask yourself, continue, like, why haven't more of your friends, because that's what we need.
Right.
And we're trying to change the dynamic of two, and saying this as a kind of a, we've said this, people have said this phrase over again, like old white male. Well, we kind of need to change the dynamic of not just female, but we need young women, and we need young people, because the younger we have an organization, the more sustainable we're going to be, the better we're going to be, longer pathway to education that we can have, and it makes the organization sustainable, right? And that's I think what we have. If you look at our board, we're pretty young compared to a lot of other angel associations. If you look at the age, the demographic, we have a pretty diverse board. Do we even have an old white male on our board, right? Like, I don't know. Do we?
Maybe find one.
You want to count Ahmed?
Yeah, we count Ahmed, right? But
we'll show them a picture when they edit this podcast.
Yeah.
Of Ahmed,
without the tanning
and we'll
oil.
let them decide.
Without the tanning oil, yeah. So.
Well, San Antonio is a melting pot of so many, it's a confluence of cultures. There's like no reason why we shouldn't have this huge, diverse group and organization. So, okay, let's end on a high note. I want to hear one or two, maybe one from each one of you, success story from one of the companies that went on, pitched, you or someone in the organization invested, and then now what does that look like for them, and where's the company at now?
I mean, for me, it's going to be the one that Rahul was just referring to. And I think that's one of the most, it's a success story for me personally, because I had invested on that. For Alamo Angels, because I invested through Alamo Angels, so it was a community-driven approach. But most importantly, this founder, after she exited the company, she jumped the fence, and she's now an investor within the Alamo Angels. And she's, by the way, one of the champions that you heard from on that panel for Women in Investing.
Wow.
That is now taking Women in Investing under her wing and making it happen. So that's an example of many. We got a handful of those that started their companies, grew it to the point that they exited that, and then they came back and are now contributing back to the ecosystem by being investors of Alamo Angels.
Smart.
Yeah, I'm going to give kind of a shout out to two close friends that have been part of San Antonio and I think have been incredible. Josh Sanchez with and Caleb Scott, Float Me. Man, it's phenomenal what they have been able to do. And they're so young. I mean, Caleb isn't even 21 yet.
He's turning 21 next month.
One of those guys was in the room asking a lot of questions.
Yeah, the one with all the technical questions.
Yes, about the scrap metal.
I mean, he's incredibly intelligent, and he's got so. I mean, again, we were talking about it. I think the other day, a few of us were like, man, if I had that at 21, like, holy crap, where would I be, right? And so, I mean, those are a perfect example of people who've started something here, who've stayed here, and are now so again, Josh, where he's at, but then now has become a member again and is engaged. Caleb, again, he's 20 years old and he's a member. He's hit that, and now he's starting another company, and again, another one that we're actively engaged with. So, to me, I think that's, one I like that one a lot because it's so local, and it's something that you're going to see a national, global effect with what they're doing,
Love
right? And that's, to me, it's and they've gone through the full ecosystem, right?
I earlier this week, I think Monday or Tuesday, I was with Caleb, and I was asking him, will you please do the math, because we've invested on the company through the network just at different points throughout his fundraising journey, but everyone from Alamo Angels, do the math on how much that's total. Not just the one investment that you got when you came to Alamo Angels when you
It's
pitched.
gonna be well over 7 figures.
Not quite there, but it's a
Almost.
very substantial
Pretty
figure.
close.
Wow.
It's a very substantial
Yeah, and he's
figure.
got great, like what I would call like San Antonio landmark names that have invested in him, where if I said the name
Yeah.
and you asked 100 people, all
They'd know.
100 would know that name. They've written him a 6-figure type check.
Wow.
So it's crazy at 20 years old to be able to get that.
Yeah.
So I think to me, those are just really cool. And I guarantee I look at my phone, he's probably called me 11 times. And it's funny, he'll just keep calling. He doesn't, it's almost like he doesn't stop,
He
which
won't
is
stop. He's
great,
relentless.
right?
Yeah, that's
so it's awesome. We've seen some, and there's a whole host of other really cool things that have happened through it. But those are companies that we've invested in that we're like, it's awesome to see them grow, but also more importantly, man, it's awesome to make some freaking money.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
you know, at the end of the day, like we can talk about all the feel good stuff all day long, but
they win, you win.
At the end of the day, though, it's still
so I
needs to
mean,
be
somebody
profitable.
could buy this house had they invested in something and made some money.
yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I'm gonna need that Rolodex. So
Yeah, so
Yeah,
just
we're gonna
remember
scour your phone.
19211 Habitat Cove, right?
Yeah.
That's where we're at. So.
I heard Alamo Angels get a discount when they come and tour this home, or
You
what's
gotta go.
it?
You gotta go
Yeah,
through
yeah.
me.
As long
Mention
as they
Alamo
have
Angels
the,
at
as long as
checkout
they have
when
the proper gear in place, then
Yeah.
Yeah, this one can come at a discount a little bit.
I love that. Well, I'm so happy. I loved this discussion.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys letting me be part of your podcast. Thank you for that.
Thank you for joining us, David. Where can everyone find you on social media, Instagram, website, the works?
LinkedIn, I think. Juan Sebastian Garzon is my whole name, so you can easily find me there on LinkedIn. Same name for Instagram and Facebook, if anybody still uses Facebook.
Yeah.
That's it for me. I have not gotten into TikTok like Rahul has.
The official RBP, patelgains.com. Yeah.
Awesome.
He's
Well,
easy.
For more information about Alamo Angels and women in investing, reach out to one of the three of us. We're happy to help get you connected or involved.
I'm happy to chime in. Thank you guys for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, you should say.
Thank you for having us.
All right, y'all have a good one.